Good morning, everybody. This is Raj Shukla with River Alliance of Wisconsin, where we have for over a quarter century now empowered people like you to protect and restore water across Wisconsin. We're thrilled to be able to present a special screening of When the Earth Moves with our partners at the Outrider Foundation. We will take audience questions after the screening, and I encourage all of you to use the Q&A tool. It has an icon in the bottom toolbar. You'll be able to type in questions of your own or vote for another question that you like. So make sure to jot all your ideas down there. Now, I'm personally honored to share the message of this film alongside a messenger who's inspired so many of us in Wisconsin and beyond, Tia Nelson. Many of you know her as part of a Wisconsin conservation lineage that gave us Earth Day. I know Tia as a colleague, as a mentor, and as a dear friend, and I'm excited that she's agreed to join us here today. Tia, thank you so much for sharing this film with us. Please talk about what inspired you to create this for all of us.
Yeah, well, good morning, Raj. It's great to be with you and all of those allied with the River Alliance and the important work you do to protect Wisconsin waters. This was the 50th anniversary of Earth Day, which my father founded April 22nd, 1970. And I wanted to make a film that, of course, I feel motivated to honor my father and his legacy. But I wanted the film to not just be a reflection on the past, but a reflection on the present and the future of the environmental movement. And most importantly, I wanted it to tell a story that helped give people a sense of agency in recognizing that the first Earth Day was successful beyond my father's wildest dreams because individuals responded to his call to action. And through his leadership and grassroots activism, they changed the course of American history. And it's an important story, especially in these times when we wonder how we can make a difference and contribute to building that brighter future. And I wanted to tell a story that helped remind people that they have great power to make a difference. And so for me, I'm grateful. I recruited climate change youth activist Varshini Prakash, the co-founder of the Sunrise Movement, which got us the Green New Deal, and Bob Inglis, a former Republican congressman from one of the reddest districts in the United States. And Bob has founded a conservative group called Republic EN, also dedicated to climate change. He went through a metamorphosis of sorts from being a climate change skeptic to dedicating his life to climate change. And through Bob and Varshini, my goal was to demonstrate the first Earth Day was multi-generational, it was bipartisan, and it had a social justice element as well. And so I wanted to tell that story and hopefully inspire youth and adults alike today.
Well, we're so grateful that you did. And maybe we should just stop talking and watch this movie. How about we just go there?
That sounds good.
Our goal is not just an environment of clean air and water and scenic beauty while forgetting about the worst environments in America. Our goal is an environment of decency, quality, and mutual respect for all human beings and all other living creatures. Our goal is a decent environment in its broadest and deepest sense, and it will require a long, sustained political, moral, ethical, and financial commitment far beyond any commitment ever made by any society in the history of man.
My name is Tia Nelson. I am the daughter of Gaylord Nelson, the founder of Earth Day. My father was an extraordinary dad. He was an extraordinary leader. Growing up as his daughter, it was mostly a great privilege, but also I felt a heavy sense of duty to public service and to making a difference with my life. I work for the Outrider Foundation. Our goal is to educate people about big global challenges like climate change. One of my favorite quotes from my father was delivered on the eve of the first Earth Day in 1970. He said, "Ecology is a big science,
not a narrow one. It's a big concept, and it is concerned with all the ramifications of all the relationships of all living creatures to each other and their environment."
So when he talked about the environment, he talked about ecology and environment in the broadest sense, in the most inclusive sense. That idea resonated with students across the country. Collectively, they made a difference that was unforeseeable.
This movement and this fight is about all of us, because what is more fundamental than the air that we breathe, than water, than the soil that we stand on, than the land that we love? Like, what is more fundamental to every single one of us than that? My name is Varshini Prakash. I'm from Boston, Massachusetts, and I am one of the co-founders of Sunrise Movement. We are building a movement of young people all across this nation to stop the climate crisis and create millions of good jobs for our generation in the process. And when I began looking back into what the first Earth Day was like, what it meant, the level of people who got involved, the kind of political action, I think for me, Earth Day now is about getting back to our roots.
My father was brilliant at working across the aisle to build consensus. He knew when to compromise, he knew when to stick to his principles. Think of all of the important environmental laws that were passed after that first Earth Day, and they were passed with significant support from both parties.
For 6 years, I said that climate change was nonsense, in as much as I represented Greenville-Spartanburg, South Carolina, probably one of the reddest districts, the reddest state of the nation. That was the end of the inquiry for me. So I admit that's fairly ignorant, but that's the way it was for 6 years. So I'm Bob Inglis, and I run an outfit called republicen.org, where convincing conservatives that they're really good on climate and that they've got the answer. It's free enterprise innovation. My son, the eldest of our 5 kids, came to me. He was voting for the first time because he just turned 18. And he said to me, "Dad, I'll vote for you, but you're going to clean up your act on the environment." It's the first of a 3-step metamorphosis for me. Step 2 was going to Antarctica with the science committee, seeing the evidence in the ice core drillings. Step 3 was another science committee trip. It's there that at a stopover at the Great Barrier Reef, great blessing there was meeting an Australian climate scientist named Scott Heron, and just being inspired by his faith to act on climate change.
When Bob spoke about climate change while serving in the United States Congress, he was primaried and he lost his election. He was attacked for speaking the words climate change. This was a transformative moment in his life and led to him dedicating his whole career today to addressing the climate change challenge.
For young people growing up in this country, we have been defined by the climate crisis. People who have been born after the year 2000 have never lived a year on this planet that wasn't one of the hottest years on record. We are the climate generation. And so now, at a young age, we have realized that if our politicians aren't going to do something about this problem, then we have to take matters into our own hands.
Through leadership of people like Varshini, the youth movement has been energized in the last year in ways that resemble what was happening almost 50 years ago when the first Earth Day occurred.
There comes a place where activism drives even the crustiest old-timer to decide to get involved.
I don't think there's any other issue viewed in its broadest sense which is as critical to mankind as the issue of the quality of the environment in which we live.
Environmentalism is not a partisan issue. Environmentalism is a quality of life issue for all of us.
You know, I'm very optimistic about the future. I think we're going to solve climate change. It's going to be that conservatives come together with progressives to figure out we're literally in this together.
This is about not just changing light bulbs, this is about changing our politics. And if anything, we will be successful because we do it together.
I want the youth of today to know that I have done everything that I can to ensure on the 100th anniversary of Earth Day, we are celebrating a brighter future. We're at a critical moment in history. We have an opportunity to address the greatest environmental challenge of our time.
Are we able? Yes. Are we willing? That's the unanswered question.
Thank you for creating that video and for sharing it with all of us. I have some questions for you, and I know our audience does as well. I'd like to remind all of you out there watching, use the Q&A tool in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen to type in questions or to vote for questions that you want Tia and I to address. Now, Tia, River Alliance is set to release the first of its kind comprehensive vision of a future with clean water for all in Wisconsin. And it includes 12 central elements that include things like elevating clean water to among our highest priorities in Wisconsin, reinforcing the cultural, economic, and public health significance of water, ensuring that the resource is available to all, white, black, brown, immigrant, native-born, naturalized alike, and preventing challenges like PFAS and nitrate pollution and the dangers of lead in our pipes before the problems occur. It's a big vision woven together with big ideas, and we felt your father's words as we were creating it. The mention of that quote and the video of that quote, ecology is a big science, not a little science. And we see how interconnected the health of our waters are to the health of our people, to our livelihoods, and our culture. In a time with so much polarization in Wisconsin, Tia, what advice do you think your dad would give those of us working to protect and restore water and working to protect and restore our environment as a whole?
That's a great question, Raj. You know, here's the thing. Our right to breathe clean air, drink clean water, the universal right. You quoted from my father's speech, and I think this is an area where he said ecology is a big science, not a narrow one. I found a print version of the speech in which he goes on to say the environment beyond, including the worst environments in America, in the inner city, he said it's rats in the ghetto and public housing unworthy of its name. His original call to action had a very strong social justice lens through which he was seeing the environment in this broad way, and very much including our rights to drink clean water. And keep in mind, more environmental laws were passed in the decade that followed the first Earth Day than any other time in American history. Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, with significant bipartisan support. And so one of the things I worked hard to do in this film was show that while Varshini Prakash as a youth activist and Bob English as a conservative may have different ideas about how to solve the climate crisis, that was fine to me. What was important was that they came together to have the conversation, that they recognized that this is a great threat to us today and to future generations, and to sit down and have a conversation about what we're going to do about it. So I'm very focused on building those bridges, finding new voices like Bob Inglis. Outrider's also working with Brent Suter, the pitcher of the Milwaukee Brewers, who is our sports ambassador and a very dedicated environmentalist. Finding voices that can, as I often say, reach beyond the choir and grow the congregation. And I think finding and amplifying new voices, recognizing the social justice piece of this question. And then I think perhaps most importantly, talking about solutions. We know what we need to do, and talking about how we can address these challenges with the right set of laws, right set of actions and engagements is a critical part of building that brighter future. So build bridges, amplify the voices of a diverse community, and talk about solutions. I think those three things would be my primary focus. Absolutely.
So River Alliance has built itself around service to local watershed leaders across the state. We've helped local watershed groups, something like 90 local watershed groups, get up and running and help support them with technical assistance and the like to this day. They are a source of inspiration to everybody on our team at River Alliance. I would love to learn about who inspires you here in Wisconsin or elsewhere. So I think we got a Wisconsin crowd with us today.
Yeah. Well, there are so many people that have influenced me and my father. Certainly, I'm inspired by the local watershed groups, and here, I live on the north side. The volunteer group for Cherokee Marsh is just doing great work to help restore and protect that wetland complex. I'm quite close with a number of the folks who are at Friends of Warner Park, where both park cleanup and education and community outreach goes on. And really the volunteers that make these organizations work in their community are really a critical part of protecting our waterways.
Absolutely. And, at River Alliance, we dabble in the political every now and then. And one thing that we've learned when we talk to people out there who are engaged politically is among the people that they trust most on issues around the environment and public health are local watershed leaders, a lot like the folks that have joined us today. So that is a call to arms to those of you that are watching, and that is a thank you to those that are watching. We could not make progress without you. One more question that I have, and then we'll get to some questions from our audience. How do you respond to those who say that protecting the environment means sacrificing jobs? How would you respond to that?
Well, I have a lot of favorite quotes from my father, but one of my most favorite is a quote which he restated quite often, which is, "The economy is a wholly owned subsidiary of the environment, not the other way around." You cannot have a prosperous economy without having a healthy environment, because our economic well-being and growth is dependent on a finite resource base, and you can't deplete those resources and put them on the profit side of the ledger and expect to have positioned yourself to prosper in the future. So, and especially today, in terms of for example, renewable energy jobs, the growth rate in clean energy jobs is exponential, and far more people are employed in clean energy than in fossil fuel energy in the country today. And but ultimately, our economic well-being is dependent upon access to clean water and clean air, and a brighter future is dependent on how we manage this finite resource base in a way that is economically prosperous, and you can't do one without the other.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. That is a question I'm sure we will hear continually in the days to come. So I appreciate your perspective on it. Here's a question from Paul in the Q&A section. Tia, you have a long personal history on the climate change issue. What's the difference now versus when you first started working on this issue?
More tired. Oh, that's probably not the answer he was looking for.
Yes, and.
Yes, and well, for one, we didn't have the polarization of the science to the degree that we have today, and that's quite unfortunate. When I was a young person, I was in Rio de Janeiro in 1992 at the Earth Summit when George Herbert Walker Bush signed the Framework Convention on Climate Change and said the United States will lead the world in addressing the existential threat of global warming. So there was a Republican president talking about leading within the United Nations system a global response to a global environmental threat. And the climate denial, science deniers hadn't emerged at that time. That developed later. So, and that's a pretty significant challenge in certain ways. But I think really, at the end of the day, we know what the scientific consensus is, and we know what the solutions are. And the real challenge is building the social and political will to act, because we understand the science, we know what the solutions are. The tall task in front of us is to build those bridges and rebuild bipartisan support around these quality of life issues of clean water, clean air, and climate change, and build that political will. And that's what, it is one of the reasons I'm feeling more optimistic and hopeful. If you look at the polling data, young Republicans poll is concerned about climate change polls at about the same rate as Democrats, for example. There's a big difference by age among Republicans, but among youth, it's pretty much a universal concern. As Varshini says in the film, there isn't a year that they haven't lived through, record-breaking climate catastrophes. And so, young people today are ready to act, and they want to see a response, and that is putting pressure on certain political quarters. It's not happening fast enough, in my opinion, but it is happening. And it's easy to miss because talk television loves to amplify our divisions, but I think there's more unity than one might actually suspect,
I think you're right. And we'll need it to address something that was brought up by a couple of people asking questions, Cindy and others in the chat and in the Q&A area about PFAS. These are the forever chemicals that are kind of ubiquitous in manufacturing processes. There are hotspots in Wisconsin, kind of around every airport, and manufacturing sites. So in Marinette, we've seen a lot of concern about it. In Madison as well. In Marinette, during the Water Quality Task Force hearings, we had a Republican legislator who was talking about banning these substances from production. What do you have anything in particular to say about PFAS and how we might deal with challenges like PFAS, some of which we can't even foresee?
No, actually, can I ask you that question and learn?
Well, sure. I'm not sure if my answer is going to be enlightening, but I hope so. Part of what we are proposing with the Wisconsin Water Agenda is that the state manage water and chemicals that would interact with our water in a way that prevents problems like PFAS from emerging, just like PCBs emerged years after they were introduced in a variety of manufacturing processes. We know that in the Fox River up in the northeast part of the state, They're dredging for PCPs right now, and it's the conclusion of a 12-year process. Part of what we need to do is orient our regulatory system and our management system to be preventative in nature and not just reactive to problems that emerge. We believe that we have the minds to do it and we have the technology to do it. What we don't have, unfortunately, yet is the political will. But if that legislator in Marinette is any indication, perhaps we have some daylight to maneuver a bit there.
Yeah.
Now, before we run out of time, I wanted to get to one more question from Meg, and I think it's a fitting way to end. And you kind of touched on this a little bit, but what keeps you optimistic in the fight against climate change and in the fight for this planet's future?
Well, my father's story. I mean, he was just a little boy from a little town in northern Wisconsin. He had a really big dream, and that dream came true. He saw Bob La Follette speak when he was 10 years old. He decided he wanted to grow up and be a United States Senator and be a public servant and make the world a better place, and came to care passionately about the environment. And Earth Day was successful beyond his wildest dreams. I think of his story and I'm inspired by it every day. I take great inspiration from that. I think of Rosa Parks, who simply said no when told to move to the back of the bus in the early 1960s during a time of segregation. She changed the trajectory of the civil rights movement. She couldn't possibly have known that day what the outcome of her simple act of defiance would be, any more than Greta Thunberg, the youth activist, could have known that the simple act of protesting in front of the Swedish parliament would energize and launch a global climate youth movement. And so through these acts of principle on the part of individuals who get up in the morning, they work with what they've got, they operate from their place of values, they do what they can with what they have, and unimaginable things can happen. We know that. My father's life is a testament to that, and so many other figures who have inspired me, from Greta Thunberg to Rosa Parks. They changed the world, and they couldn't have imagined they were doing so in the process of simply getting up in the morning and endeavoring to make a difference. And that's what motivates me every day of my life.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And it's certainly what inspires me, voices like Greta's and Rosa Parks before her. And honestly, voices like yours, Meg, the fact that we have dozens of people who have joined us today to talk about our shared values and to talk about what we are going to do together to make a difference. That is inspiring to me. And I know the moment that we are all living in right now feels disorienting at times and overwhelming at times. But I don't know. That's kind of what I feel like when I wake up every morning too. And maybe that's what we're all going through. A lot of people waking up all at once, and hopefully we'll do some good after all of this over the last few months. But we have time for one more question, Tia, and it feeds into what we were just talking about. If you can think of 2 or 3 things that people who are watching today can get up and do to be a part of the solutions that we're seeking, what would you say they are?
Yeah, volunteer at your local Watershed group. Be politically engaged, be informed in who's running for local and state office, and be sure that your voice is heard. Write your legislators, write your city councils, get involved in a volunteer group. If there's an organization for everyone, really. And for me, I take a lot of comfort in the little things I do at my house, composting my food waste and growing my own vegetables. And sometimes just the groundedness that comes from connecting in my own backyard and connecting with nature is important and it has value to me. So get involved, take individual action, be politically engaged, join your local watershed group. All of these are things that every one of us can do and get enjoyment and a sense of community out of.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd encourage you all, of course, to get involved, just as Tia is suggesting. And if you go to wisconsinrivers.org, we can show you how to get involved. Sign up for our action alerts. We will give you all the tools you need to contact your legislators and make sure your voices are heard and to take action locally. But don't forget to go and talk about these issues with your family, especially your family who doesn't always agree with you. And talk about these issues in your church communities. Talk about these issues with the PTO. Talk about these issues with the people that are personally important to you. We need to get them on our side too, and we need to get them engaged as well. And then demand the very best for Wisconsin from our elected leaders. We all understand how nuanced and difficult these issues are and how complicated the solutions will be and how many interests we have to balance to get there. But getting to a solution should never involve sacrificing our insistence on a Wisconsin that is truly great for everybody in this state. So demand excellence, talk to everyone, and get involved. We are over time, Tia, and I know we could probably do this for many more minutes, and maybe we'll get a chance to do that. But for now, thank you so much to you. Thank you to Outrider. Thank you to all of our viewers today. Get involved at wisconsinrivers.org or head to the Outrider Foundation's website as well. Tia, maybe you could give a plug.
Outrider.org. You'll find a lot of great content there, from the science to Brent Suter's story, to little short form climate solutions videos that are very inspiring. Lots of surprising stories in there about climate solutions you might not have thought of. And just go to outrider.org and look around. I know you'll find some content that you'll find helpful and hopefully inspiring and help engage and inspire action.
Well, with that, you all have homework to do. Head to those websites and get moving. Thank you all for joining us today. Thank you to Amanda and Paul and Cindy and Meg for your questions. And thank you all for all you do for our world.